Howdy Beans, and welcome back to another exciting and special episode of the Howdy Beans podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Howdy Bean. Hope you're doing well, hope you're all good, as per usual. Today, we're going to be looking at an absolute joyous classic from my childhood. It is up there with one of my core memories, and I can't believe it's taken me this long to look into it, but I'm finally doing it. So today, we're going to be talking about George of the Jungle from 1997. Oh boy, I cannot wait to get into this one. But before we can, because I'm deep in the jungle, I want to do with housekeeping because I like to keep my house nice and clean. So make sure that you're following the podcast on Twitter at howdybeans_pod. If you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you listen to this on Spotify, don't forget to follow the podcast and leave a 5-star rating. And you can now follow the podcast on TikTok for more of my side quest little reviews. So that is that. Now, what makes this episode so important is it's my birthday. Woo! It's my birthday. It's my birthday. Woo. But let's all get ready. Let's get ready. Stand around because I know you're all listening. 1, 2, 3, go. Happy birthday to you. You live in a zoo. You smell like a monkey. And you look like one too. Way! Woo! See, wasn't that wonderful? I'm a big child, I know. I am 28 today. I'm 28 on the 28th of January, which will only ever happen once in my life. Never happen again. So today is a very special day. And again, that just calls for a very sort of special episode. I have many fond memories of George in the Jungle. To be honest, my earliest memories, I think this was... See, I was trying to think before I hit record and while I was trying to put things together for this review. I was trying to think, was this my first sort of introduction to Brendan Fraser as a character, as an actor, as a person? Because I'm not sure if it was The Mummy or if it was this. Because I was born in 98. This came out in 97. I'm sure The Mummy came out of a year later. I think it came out in 99. I can't really remember. But I remember watching one of these first, and I'm inclined to say I think it was George in the Jungle, I think, because I have a lot of fun memories of this film. As I've said many times on the podcast, when I was younger, I used to go to my grandparents a lot. And I remember, again, this was back in the day of like before DVDs, everybody had like tapes, VHS tapes. Going to my grandparents. And they used to put me in the living room and they used to put me in front of the TV. And my grandparents had a lot of VHS tapes. They had like Cool Runnings. They had George of the Jungle. There was one with Tim Allen and he goes into the jungle and he gets like adopted son. I can't remember the name of that one. Jungle to Jungle, I think it was called. And there was a couple of Disney ones as well, like Peter Pan and things like that. And they had like sort of more grown-up ones. But I remember being gravitated towards the George in the Jungle box set because it was just a man like who was just swinging from a tree, if I remember correctly. It said George in the Jungle. If I remember, there was a gorilla on the cover. And I was just, oh my God, well, what's that? You know, being a very sort of young mind. Because again, this was around about probably like 1999, 2000, 2001, thereabouts, potentially. I remember putting the tape in, watching all sort of the Disney adverts, and then just have that George of the Jungle, George of the Jungle, George of the Jungle, watch out for that tree. Ah! Watch out for that tree. Bang, boom, George. You know, because obviously this movie begins, and I love it. You don't get many movies that do this anymore. You didn't get a lot of movies that used to do it back in the day, but it's an animated intro song. So he had like a little anime, so it told the story of like George, like how he ended up getting stuck in the jungle and that sort of thing, which I loved. Again, me being a young person, you get the bang, boom, boom, and you get all good, woo, you know, everybody's sort of like sighing because he's hit another tree sort of thing. And as a young kid, like my very sort of magpie sort of brain, flashing lights, that sort of thing, was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then for the movie to begin, and you have Brendan Fraser as George, and you've got the apes, and then you've got, you know, he's deep in the jungle, and then as the movie goes on, you've got the comedy, which at the younger age I didn't get. It was just a silly man running around, falling into trees, being sort of silly, to be honest. So I have a lot of fun memories of it. Just every time I go into my grandparents, like, I want to watch George in the Jungle, and they would do. I would sit and watch George in the Jungle one after the other. I'd put it on, watch it. George in the Jungle, bam. So then this is the same grandparents that I went to when I first watched Jack Frost. Christmas Day or Christmas Eve thereabouts, watching Jack Frost, actually bawling my eyes out. Mummy's dead, and she has to put it back on, just to make sure. No, look, he's still alive, and end up watching Jack Frost a second time. I've told that story before, but yeah, same grandparents, and yeah, I have a lot of fun memories of going to these grandparents and just watching these movies over and over again, of just because they were just so good. So I have to thank my grandparents a lot for introducing me to a lot of really brilliant movies when I was younger, and as I got older, I got to watch more of those other VHS tapes and being sort of introduced to other fantastic sort of stories and worlds and characters and stuff like that. So got to put a big thank you out to them on my birthday. But yeah, I just love George and the Jungle, and I can't believe it's taken me this long to talk about this film. Specifically as well, I'm a huge Brendan Fraser fan, and I feel like it's very fitting because Brendan Fraser is having a renaissance at the moment, with The Whale and other things that he's done. And like, I think a week or two ago this month, he released Rental Family, which looks brilliant. He's in talks of potentially coming back for like the next Mummy movie. And Rachel Weisz is coming back. So it's like, it's the perfect time to talk about Brendan Fraser and possibly, and I think 100%, my first interaction with this character of this actor, of this person that I've been grown very fond of, and I'm a deeply sort of like in love with. I just think he's a brilliant actor, and I wish we got to see more of him, but I'm glad he's making a sort of resurgence now. So yeah, George of the Jungle, I can't wait. Anyway, before we get into sort of the review and all that, I've got to do sort of the movie synopsis and get through the cast, but, there's not a lot to say on the cast, so we won't take us very, very long. So, as for the movie synopsis, so it goes as follows, for anybody that doesn't know the story of George in the Jungle. So, it goes as follows. George has raised himself since he was a baby. And a plane crash stranded him in an African jungle. Now, as an adult, George has his first human contact in years when he rescues explorer Ursula from a lion. George and Ursula connect, and she leaves her fiancé Lyle and takes George back to San Francisco. But when George learns that his gorilla buddy has been captured, he and Ursula have to return to the jungle to rescue him. So that is the synopsis for the movie. As for the cast, so we have an absolutely brilliant star-studded cast, an absolutely underrated cast, if you ask me, because they're all hilarious in it. So you have Brendan Fraser as George of George of the Jungle. You have Leslie Mann as Ursula. You have Thomas Hayden Church as Lyle. You've got Richard Roundtree as Kiwan. You've got Greg Crutwell as Max. Abraham Brumbury as Thor. Holland Taylor as Beatrice. And Kelly McEnroe as Betsy. And John Cleese as an ape named Ape. And you've got other members of this cast as well, absolutely brilliant. As for the productions, there's not actually to go on the production, really, surprisingly. So for the last two movies I've looked at for my birthday, I've actually found a lot. Not a lot you can find on the production of George in the Jungle, which is a shame, because I generally thought there'd be a lot, specifically it being a Disney production, but surprisingly no. But this is what I was able to find. So, screenwriter Dana Olson originally wrote a spec script titled Gorilla Boy, a parody of Tarzan told from the perspective of a wealthy American woman similar to the character of Jane. Although Olson initially believed Disney would not be interested due to the studio having recently acquired the rights to the George of the Jungle animated series, his agent submitted the script anyway, and Disney acquired it. Olson was subsequently hired to rewrite the existing screenplay. He later stated that the development process at Disney was collaborative and that he appreciated the studio script and notes. Animal scenes in the film were created using a combination of live animals, puppetry, and computer-generated imagery. Scenes involving the lion, elephant, and toucan used a mix of real animals and animatronic or CGI elements, including a puppet lion during the fight sequences and CGI to depict Shep, the elephant, having and behaving like a dog. Live animals, including an orangutan, chimpanzee, and capuchin monkeys, were also used, and minor computer enhancement for certain sequences. 4 adult lions were used in filming. Joseph and Caleb were trained by Charlie Monterey from the zoo in Salos, California. Samut also served as Brendan Fraser's stunt double for a lion attack sequence. Additional lions, Bongo and Caesar, were trained by Michael Hackenberg of Bowmanville Zoo. Animatronic puppetry was involved and employed for scenes requiring specific behaviour, such as a lion winking at George from behind a bush. Fraser also interacted with a stuffed lion in certain shots. The gorilla characters were portrayed by costume performers from the Jim Henson Creature Shop. Their suits were made from yak hair, and their facial expressions were controlled using a remote operate animatronics. Additional visual effects were provided by DreamQuest Images. The jungle environment was constructed on a soundstage in Los Angeles. The stage measured approximately 750 feet in length, 90 feet in width, and 75 feet in height at its peak. So it was a pretty damn big set. So that's all I have to say, really, of the production. Like I said, there wasn't a lot to kind of work out, really, which is a bit of a shame, because you think, like I said, a Disney production like George of the Jungle, like a film that's so widely loved and it's a bit of a cult classic, would have more to say, but that's all I could really find, to be honest. But here and there, it doesn't really matter. I have my fond memories, and I'm going to have a lot to say about the movie when we get round to reviewing it. So I'm going to go off now and watch George of the Jungle. I recommend you all do the same. So it's on Disney Plus. It's everywhere to rent for very, very cheap. Go watch it and come back and join me as we talk about my first impressions, the story, memories, feelings, how wonderful Brendan Fraser is. Basically, just going to melt about Brendan Fraser really for about an hour. Let's see. Overall thoughts, a bit of trivia if I can find some, and then we'll wrap it up nicely, and then it'll be a good way to sort of celebrate my birthday. So without all that and more, I'm going to go off now and watch George in the Jungle, and I'll see you all in a jungle minute. And welcome back, everybody. So, George in the Jungle, absolutely brilliant, bombastic, incredible, a pure nostalgia trip down memory lane. And it was kind of funny because I really showed my age while I was watching this, and I'll explain why. Pretty much, don't watch this movie if you suffer from epilepsy. Because right at the beginning, as soon as this movie begins, you have like the sound of like monkeys and rustling through leaves, like a proper jungle ambient sort of noises, and like that started going. I'm getting nostalgia. It remind me back when I'm at my nan and my granddad's house, sitting in the living room on my own. We've just put the VHS tape in. I've seen all the trailers. The movie's about to begin, and I'm really getting into that sort of George in the Jungle mood. Then all of a sudden, like the cartoon starts to play. And then you've got George of the Jungle. And every time it says George of the Jungle, you're just getting like it's kind of, I don't know. It's what I can imagine, if I was in a war zone and then all of a sudden somebody knocked down the door and Spetsnaz and the SWAT teams would be cracked in as they threw the flashbangs in. I'm just getting flashbanged by George in the Jungle. I'm sitting there like, ah, and I'm really showing my age, and I hate it for it, because while this is flashing, in my head I've got, oh my God, don't watch this movie. If you have epilepsy, that's a funny line. I can put that into the review straight away. And then the other side of my brain went, I hope I don't get a migraine. You know what I mean? I realize at that moment I'm old. I'm old man. I don't go, oh my God, flashing lights, brilliant. Like when I was younger, I didn't care when I was younger. Like, I got as close to the screen as possible. I'm just like, pump that stuff into my eyes. But now, at 27, an old man, I'm sitting there going, I hope I don't get a migraine off this. So two sides of each coin. But I'm putting old man noises in now. Despite that, and actually getting round to going through the animated sort of cutscene, which I love, and I'm sitting there, I'm surprised I remember all the words. I'm like, George of the Jungle, friend to you and me. Watch out for that tree. With me getting into all that and then getting into the film where you've got the narrator. I forgot about the narrator. How can you forget about the narrator? One of the best things about this movie is he has the narrator who narrates the story. And it's kind of funny because as I'm watching this movie, I was trying to explain it to my friend, and I don't know how best to explain it. So I'm just going to just say what I said to my friend, and hopefully it makes sense. Because it doesn't, but it does. But hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say. This movie feels like a movie that's made for kids, but was made by adults, which, again, obviously it was made by adults. But what I mean by that is that you watch this movie and you go, there's a lot of adult jokes in here, and I'm not about rude or naughty sort of jokes. There's a lot of things in here that parents, adults would get more than kids. There were jokes in this movie that went way over my head when I was younger. I did not see at all. Now watching this again as an adult, I'm like, I like that. I get that. That's funny. And it's just such a clever movie. Like another movie that by Disney that's completely, a hidden, well, not, I wouldn't say hidden gem, but it is a masterpiece and has wide acclaim as being one of the best animated Disney movies of all time, and underappreciated, especially when it came out, was not George of the Jungle, was Emperor's New Groove. With David Spade, again, another brilliant sort of movie. And that kind of has narration, but the narrator is Cusco, and every now and then he'll pause the screen and he'll kind of talk to the audience and be like, oh, this is happening here, this is happening there, and all this and that. And the movie's very, very clever. It's very meta. It's very fourth wall breaking. This movie's kind of the same thing, in the same vein. One of my favourite moments, and it makes me laugh, because I love the porters. You have these porters where that only speak Swahili. And there's a moment where like they're going over a bridge, and you got Lyle. He goes, "Oh, I was on a bridge like this back in Maui, and he could rock it. It was solid as a rock, and he's rocking it." And they're like, "Don't do that, don't do that." And one of them falls off, and they'll go, "No," as if like he's fallen to his death, he's dying. And you got the narrator that goes, and I love this bit. He goes, "Don't worry, nobody dies in this movie. They just get really bad boo-boos." And then it pans to the next scene, and you've just got a guy. He's got real sort of like pissed off sort of look on his face, looking at Lyle, giving him like the stink eye, proper sort of dead eye, while his mate's next to him, patching him up. Where he's got like the sort of what's it called now? The bandages around his head and around his arm, bits of blood on it as well, sort of thing. And there's many moments like that. Even the moment where like Lyle's going through the jungle and he falls over and he goes straight into I think elephant dung, really, straight into it, mouthful of it, all over his face. And then all of a sudden the camera pans to these guys. They bunch him, and he goes, ha ha ha, proper physical comedy. This is where we lean back our heads now and laugh. And they go, ha 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 ha. It's hilarious. Like, I don't do it justice. This movie, there are moments where it has me in stitches, where I'm like, this like, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. Obviously, as I said earlier, it's a fact of, yes, it's a kids' movie, but this is made for adults. Like, yes, it's a Disney film for kids, and there are moments for kids. There are the slapsticks, there are the silliness for kids, but there's a lot of moments in this where you go, that was for the adults. That was pure adult. That was, there's a moment when Ursula takes George back to San Francisco, and she puts him in the shower, and in all fairness, Brendan Fraser, he's a handsome, gorgeous man. I will say that as a straight man, he is a very, very gorgeous man. And I think he even said in an interview a couple of years ago, he said George of the Jungle was the fittest he's ever been, in terms of his body and his physique. That is the fittest he's ever been. And it took a lot of hard work to get to it. And it shows, like, he's ripped to shreds. Like, he is, you could cut bread off him. You know what I mean? Like, he is just like as sharp as a knife. Anyway, so he comes out looking all gorgeous and wet and drenched and tanned. And we don't see that at first. Ursula's best friend's at the door. She's like, "Oh, where's this ape man?" And she's like, "Oh, George is in the shower." And then she's like, "Not anymore." And the camera pans around, and you don't see anything. Again, it's a Disney movie. You ain't going to see anything, obviously. But we all know, as adults, we all know that he's naked. He's a bit naked. And she's just like, "Oh, hubba, hubba, hubba," sort of like proper giving the sort of "I love you" sort of eyes. She's also given me the sort of give me the ring my precious sort of eyes. Anyway, so George is there. He goes, "Oh, I fell over this like yellow rock and I bumped my head." And obviously he doesn't know. He's a very sort of simple lad. And she runs over and she gets a bowl of obviously you don't really have them anymore. But like, remember back in the day, I know my grandparents had loads of them. I think my mum had some as well. You had a bowl full of fruit, but it wasn't real fruit. It was like fake plastic fruit. You just had a bowl of fruit. She kind of takes it out, and feathers. What's the reason there was feathers in there and stones? Anyway, she dips it out, and she goes, "Oh," she makes a joke about his member, but I can't remember the joke. Anyway, she covers it, and then she gets a magazine to cover his bum, and she goes off, and then you get the friend going, "Yes, I can see why they picked him to be the king of the jungle," because obviously he's member. And there's just adult jokes spun around, and it's fact of like completely when I've met as a kid, did not see any of this, did not get it. And then she's talking to a friend, and a friend's like, "Oh my God, you're really hot on George," and she's like, "No, I'm not. And then a friend sits there and goes, "Can I have him?" just it just makes me giggle. Obviously, I'm still in first impressions. Like, I haven't even got around to talking about the story properly yet, but it's just watching this movie brings back so much nostalgia, and I love it for the fact that I can watch this movie and just have so much more love in it, so learning so much more. Again, being young, not being able to read. I used to struggle with my reading because of my dyslexia. So when the porters and Lyle, was speaking Swahili, and like it'd come up the subtitles, I couldn't read them, or I couldn't read them fast enough. So being old and being able to read it, and then being able to connect with these characters on a better level is wonderful as well. And about to get the jokes and to get a lot of the adult jokes as well, and not the kiddie jokes, and even the parts that are made for kids. I love like when George first finds Ursula, he goes, "Oh, look, funny looking fella," because he's never seen a woman before. He thinks it's the dude. And that's funny, and you got Brother Ape, and Brother Ape is basically trying to he's like, my brothers, we're related. And he goes, well, we're not technically related. And he goes, well, we are. And then Brother Ape's like, yeah, well, okay, we are, but we're just like distant relatives. And then George's like, well, Brother Ape, and it's just little moments like this, like, even though the moments that are made for kids still making me giggle. It was a pure nostalgia journey, and it was wonderful. I just happened to ruin it for myself at the beginning, where I was like, I feel so old. I'm like, I'm going to get migraine. I didn't, and I haven't, by the way, but still, I had to sort of just get really bored and old and be like, I'm going to get migraine for these flashing lights. But still, loved it. I enjoyed it. So obviously, as you imagine, first impressions were going to be very, very sort of positive anyway. As for the story, so basically, the long and short of this story is the fact of you have George. The plane crashes in the jungle, and everybody else is fine, but George is lost. They can't find baby George. George grows up in the jungle and becomes the White Ape, and that's what he's known as a legend. Then you have Ursula. Ursula is a young woman who's rich, who basically wants to go off and kind of just live a life of adventure. And it's really nice. Like, she's got a camcorder, she's filming everything. You've got Mr. Now, is it Norway? I think his name is. I think that's what the name is of the main sort of guide. And then you've got the porters, and they're really lovely. And she's taking photos of everybody and all the monkeys, and Mr. Norway's helping her, and all of a sudden ruins it. Lyle, her sort of douchey, sort of, I've got loads of money, so I'm betting everybody. Fiance comes out of nowhere, and he's trying to get her out there. He's like, you don't want to be here, I can have us in like the Hilton at the Nairobi, in 2 hours, and a helicopter to come get us, and all this and that. And she's like, Lyle, I don't want to leave, leave me alone, sort of thing. And he's got his own poachers, Max and Thor. They're basically just well. Yeah, one of them's really, really British, which it's funny because I'm sitting there thinking, I haven't seen this guy in anything else, but he's got a proper sort of typical British sort of accent, which is very sort of Londoner sort of accent. And Lyle is basically trying to get Ursula to go back. While he's trying to do that, he's sort of making jokes, and the porters are starting to not like him and sort of thing, because he's a douche. Basically, he's a real not very nice person. And he's trying his best to like translate, and he thinks he's doing a brilliant job of translating, and he basically, I think he says to him something under the lines of hello ladies, something sailor, do you want to go and get malaria or something like that, and we'll meet here for tea or something. So basically, it's completely broken Swahili, like he not saying it properly at all. They're all laughing at him. He thinks, oh, see, look, I've got it working. And then, but there was one moment where you can kind of sit there and went, that hasn't aged very well. When he goes over to them, he goes, oh, I know how to bargain with these people. And he goes over and he tries to give him like stogies, give him cigars, try to light them. He tries to, and then, he's like, oh, and then he has like this gun and he fires it, and it's not really a gun, it's a lighter, and it lights up, and then, he lights the cigars, and then he goes, oh, look, magic fire. And then he gets a camera and looks to take a photo, and he goes, look, magic photo, and stuff like that. And I'm sitting there going, oh, God, that hasn't aged well at all. And it wasn't until then you have the one main guy who got hurt with, like, fell over and got the really bad boobers. basically looks at Lyle and basically says to him, we don't get no subtitles here, sadly, but like basically says to him in Swahili, something, and then they all laugh. And then Lyle's there, like, translation, please. Like, I don't get the joke. And then Nawe, the main sort of leader, basically says to him, was like, he says something about he likes your camera, that the one that he tries to give him, tries to offer it, but I prefer the lens on my camera, which is obviously a better camera. I also see that your lens is dirty. I have the equipment to clean it for you. Basically say, look, I'm not an idiot. You don't need to talk to me like a child. You don't need to give me things. I already have a camera that's better than the one that you've just given me, you cheapskate, sort of thing. So there were funny moments, but there was a few things here and there. I'm like, oh god, that was proper sort of like 2000s. That's not great, but still, despite little things like that, and again, it's a sort of throwaway sort of thing, but I really, really just love and enjoy this movie. I do, and like as I was saying with the story, as it sort of goes on, and George learns and sort of falls in love with Ursula. It's very much like Tarzan in that respect. Like like Tarzan meets Jane, Jane and Tarzan sort of fall in love with each other. It's a very love story. Same thing sort of here. Like Ursula, like, she's freaking out. She feels like she's having like a fever dream, like this white ape. And then you've got the brother ape, and he's talking, which is played by John Cleese. And he's like, well, I'm probably not going to talk around her because it seems to distress her. So he doesn't talk around her. So every time he's doing art or he's doing the dishes, and every time he notices that she's watching him, he just stops what he's doing and starts acting like an ape, like, ooh, 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 and like George is trying to find ways to woo Ursula, and he talks to Brother Ape, and obviously Brother Ape tries to teach him the ways of how an ape, how a gorilla would treat, would get a mate. So like puff your cheeks out, show your teeth, that sort of thing. Throw leaves in the air, go around, that sort of thing around. Like monkeys start making grunting noise, that sort of thing. So George tries it. Doesn't work. Ursula leaves because she thinks that he's a bit crazy, and then George goes back to like Brother Ape, like, look, it didn't work. Like, why didn't it work? What happened? And she goes, did you throw the leaves? And he goes, yes, I threw the leaves. Did you puff your cheeks? Yes, I threw the leaves. That would make noise and stuff like that. And in the end, it just turns out that George just had to be himself, just had to be human, something that he's never really been, even though he is a human, but he's never actually been allowed to be human with another human. So he's never technically ever been a human. And Lyle comes, and because again, the reason why George meets Ursula is because Lyle takes Ursula away. Then we're attacked by a lion. George comes in, basically body slams him, full on WWE wrestling. Jumps off a rubber tree, rebounds. Tombstones the lion. Takes him out completely. So there's that. So Lyle comes. He tries to get Ursula back. The poachers with him. They try to take out George, or try to take out the elephant because of the ivory. George runs in to help Shep. Brother Ape, he jumps out and he goes, Shep, run! They all hear that he can talk, so now they're trying to get Brother Ape. And then Lyle basically shoots George. But again, because it's a Disney movie, George is fine. George survives, and Lyle goes to prison. And then obviously George goes to sort of San Francisco, and they get a lot more sort of close relationship. But there's a great movie where like George is in the house eating junk food, and there's an advert on TV because basically said, you want a couple with your love life, you share a hot cup of coffee with each other, and then that's it. And George's like, that's it. George want Ursula, George need coffee, and like he just chugs like tons of coffee, and he's like off his nut on caffeine. Then he goes out, explores San Francisco, and he ends up saving a man there, and they end up falling in love. And then you have like the stuck-up mom, where she basically says like, zebras marry zebras, apes marry apes, spots marry spots, stripes marry stripes. Well, we're spots and you're stripes, sort of thing. Basically saying, you're not good enough for my daughter, go away. And then she even makes a get adult joke where she goes under the lines of if you don't leave now and you ruin my daughter's life, I'm going to remove the thing that makes you the king of the jungle, i.e. his member. There's a lot of member jokes in this, isn't there? And which I would never assumed for a kids film, but there you go. Anyway, moving on. And then suddenly George leaves because he's got to go save Brother Ape because the poachers are getting him. And Elsa comes and saves him, and then Lyle appears again. There's a funny moment with Lyle before all this when Lyle goes to prison, and you've got a lineup of all these like usual suspects sort of things, and there's Lyle just standing there, the only white man there, mind you, he's standing, he's trying to hide his face, and you got the poachers there, and you got the police, and he's like, they're going for, and he goes, him, that man, I never forget a face, and he's like, what? Me? No, you got the wrong man. And then they come and take him away, and then they throw their head back again, and ha 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 ha. I would have a whole movie of the porters of these three men just going on adventures happily, and the whole thing of the narrator, as I said at the beginning, the whole narrator of this he's hilarious. And there's a moment where you've got Max and Thor, the two sort of bad guys with brother ape. And Thor's kind of like, you got the narrator saying the narration of the top, and Thor's looks up and goes, "Have you got anything better to say? Anything good or positive?" And then he swears at him, and he's like, "I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that." And obviously, and then you got Max, the other guy, going, "Did you just have a go at the narrator?" And Thor's just like, "Well, he started it," sort of thing. It's like they're properly breaking the fourth wall. Like, this movie's cleverer than it should be. Like, it's a George and the Jungle movie. It doesn't need to be as clever or smart or as funny as it is, really. It if anything, it just needs to be about George, a wild man, meets a beautiful woman from civilization. They couple fight again, very much like Tarzan. Tarzan meets Jane. It hasn't got to be anything extravagant, but the way the writing is, the way they make this movie, the way the characters are, the way everything is it's just a way that when you watch this movie, you can appreciate it as a child, as I did mightily when I was younger, and I watched it repeatedly over and over again. But you can watch this again as an adult, and there is so much more for the adult than there is for the child. But even as a kid, even though you don't get the joke, you're still laughing because it's funny, it's silly. Even with me, I couldn't fully read what Lyle was saying to the poachers. I couldn't fully understand what the jokes were, what they were trying to say. But because you're so caught up in that moment, you laugh anyway. I used to grow up watching Lee Evans, and we used to have it on all the time on Comedy Central. And I'll be honest, I didn't get majority of the jokes, but because, everybody else laughed, because parents laughed, my sister laughed, and because the audience laughed, you was involved, so you laughed as well, even though you didn't understand what was going on. It's the same with movies, and it's same with this movie is the fact of, even though I didn't know what was going on, I still laughed and enjoyed myself and had a very fond memory of this movie because I was so invested in it. And again, this is why I just love doing the podcast, and why I love going back and looking at movies, is the fact of, you just notice there's so much stuff in these films where they completely miss you by as a kid, and then you watch it again as you're adult, and you're like, damn, this is cheeky, but in a good way, So yeah, I love it. I do. I really do. And like, Brendan Fraser, I just watch this movie and I just look at Brendan and I think, what a talent. This guy did School Ties, did The Mummy, did is it Airheads? Not Airheads. It's got Adam Sandler in it, and it's got Steve Buscemi. I think it's Airheads. Which is another. I can't remember the name properly, but it's another brilliant movie. He did that, and again, like I said, he did The Mummy. He did this. He did Bedazzled, which is another brilliant underrated movie of his that one day I need to cover. And he's done loads of other films, and then I'm glad that he's now sort of getting that resurgence because he is such a talent. Blast from the Past is another movie that he did that no one ever talks about. How brilliant Blast from the Past is. Which another film like Bedazzled I've got to look into because it's just brilliant. But this is my point. Like, you look at sort of Brendan Fraser, and it just makes sense. Complete sense to me and to anybody else as to why he's so good and why people love him so much, because he's just a talent. He was a chameleon. He should have been a star. I know he was a star, but he should have been a star. And I know, again, I'm not getting into it, but there was a lot of things in the background as to why he had to step back from Hollywood. But I'm glad he's now making a comeback. I'm glad he's now getting his flowers in terms of he's getting his sort of due diligence, in terms of things are happening now that he can finally sort of get his sort of like, well, I don't know the best way to explain it. Just he's getting everything that he deserves. The Whale. Haven't seen it yet, but I've heard it's incredible. Look, The Whale's on my list to watch. He did a movie recently called Rental Family, which it sounds absolutely brilliant. I watched a movie very recently that came out 2024, called Brothers. It's got Peter Dinklage in it, and the guy that played Thanos, and it's really going to bother me. Can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the guy who played Thanos, and he was obviously in the Goonies. They both play brothers, and then you have Brendan Fraser's in that movie, and he's playing like a crooked cop. And I will admit, the movie's not brilliant. It isn't, but the best moments, and the reason why I wanted to watch the movie, because Brendan Fraser was in it. And I'll be honest, every time Brendan Fraser is on the screen, he steals it, and he is the highlight of that film. And in my opinion, it's the only real reason to watch that movie, is to get Brendan Fraser in a new role, just being silly, being funny, he's brilliant, incredible talent that he is. He's awesome. And I love him. And my love of him started here with George in the Jungle, and it just grew, and watching his older stuff and watching his later stuff. And I'll always be a fan of this man. But yeah, George in the Jungle, brilliant, love it. I just, so good. So good. But see, my overall thoughts is, if you haven't seen George of the Jungle, go watch it. If you've got kids, put it on for them. They'll love it. They'll appreciate it. And you will as well. And I recommend, don't just put it on and let your kids watch it and you go off do something. No, generally put it on with your kids and watch it with them. And trust me, you'll enjoy it as much as they will, if not more. Because there's a lot of jokes in this that will go over your kids' heads, but will completely land straight with you. But that's funny. And yeah, absolutely, just brilliant. George in the Jungle. I am glad this is what I decided to sort of end my birthday celebrations on, because it is just a pure sort of childhood favorite of mine. And it's a film that's like an hour and 30 minutes long, but it doesn't feel like it. It goes by so quickly. Generally, I could sit and watch it again. The only negative I have about this movie is that when it ended, because I was watching it on Disney Plus, I was reminded that there's a George of the Jungle 2. And when I was reminded of that, I was like, oh. And it's from what I can remember, it's not overly terrible. It's just not good. You know what I mean? They change, like Brendan Fraser's not in it. Leslie Mann, she's not in it for playing Ursula. I think Thomas Hayden Church, I think he's still in it. I think it's been a while since I've watched the movie. But yeah, they changed a lot in it. They even make a joke at the beginning of the movie where the narrator kind of goes, "Oh, here we are back, in the jungle, and here's George on his noble sort of steed, Shep." And then all of a sudden it comes up and you got a different guy. He's like, "Hold on a second, who are you?" And the guy basically looks at the camera and goes, "What happened to the other guy?" And he goes, "Studio too cheap to hire Brendan Fraser." And maybe that was a dig from the writers at the movie. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I don't have that many fond memories of it. I saw it a few times because being a young kid, loving George of the Jungle, of course I wanted to watch more George of the Jungle. It's just a shame that it from sort of fleeting memories of like, it's not that good. Maybe I'll look into it, maybe I won't, but don't hold your breath. I'm not really sort of interested. Anyway, moving on. Thank you very much for listening to my thoughts and feelings of George in the Jungle. I'm actually going to see if I can find some trivia, because this movie deserves it before I wrap things up. See if I can find my notes on it. Aha, here we are. So, almost every element from the George in the Jungle 1967 cartoon series is included in this movie, even the never argue with the narrator line that shows up in Jay Ward's cartoons. Brendan Fraser's personal trainer for the film sued Fraser for not mentioning him in the credits. The trainer did not win the case. During a 2019 interview on Busy Tonight, co-star Leslie Mann confessed that she developed a real-life crush on Brendan Fraser during filming and ultimately fell in love with him. She was then surprised by Brendan hiding on set. To be honest, Leslie, we were all there. We understand. We saw this man on this film. We get it. It was after seeing this film that director Stephen Sommers considered Brendan Fraser for the role of Rick O'Connor in the Mummy movies. So there you go. Bit of trivia there that links you into the Mummies. Stephen Sommers saw Brendan in this movie and was like, that's it. I've got to have that man for Rick O'Connor. Then the rest is history. This film's production designers added an automatic juicer, elevator, love seat swing, comfy hammocks, and running water in George's treehouse. These props for this set were at a former hangar of the Howard Hughes Airport. And then Dana Olson, screenplay, began as a no, I've already done that bit. Joseph the Lion, only other notable Disney cinematic production, was being a model for Mufasa in The Lion King, as well as its direct-to-video sequel, The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, and direct-to-video DVD mid-prequel, The Lion King 3. The film was released in 1997, which marked the 30th anniversary of the original cartoon show, George of the Jungle. So that is your trivia for the movie. And it's actually funny, as I was going to look at my trivia, I've just seen there is an ad. I can book my tickets now to go watch Rental Family, which I might do actually, because I've heard it's brilliant and I just want to see more things with Brendan Fraser in, because I've gone too long without them. Like even the last movie I remember him doing, which was Furry Vengeance, even I remember really enjoying that, even though I know it didn't get very good ratings. I was like, even in that, like, Brendan Fraser, brilliant. He said Brendan Fraser fighting with animals and being himself and making those sort of iconic Fraser sort of sounds and stuff like that. So, yeah, great movie. I need to do more Brendan Fraser reviews. Now I've done The Mummy, I've done this, I've got to look into doing more. Maybe Bedazzled and Blast from the Past, because those are two films that just don't get enough love, which they both deserve it incredibly. You know, the best bit, when my favorite part is when he speaks Spanish. He's doing Spanish. He's like, "Oh my god, I'm speaking Spanish." And he's like, and then I can't speak Spanish, so I can't do it justice. But that whole scene, that whole sort of thing is just hilarious. I'm actually going to go put it on now. I think I'm going to just go watch that film now. So anyway, I'm going to go off and watch Bedazzled. But hopefully you all enjoyed this episode. Thank you very much for joining me today on my birthday. If you want to leave me sort of birthday wishes down below in the comments, incredibly grateful. But yeah, by all means, make sure that you follow me on Twitter. As recording this now, I'm also on Instagram. So if you want to check me out on Instagram, you can just type in the Howdy Beans podcast on Instagram and you'll find me there. Give me a follow and stick around. I've got some more things to add on there. So currently it's empty, but hopefully by the time you're hearing this, there should be a few things up on there for you to check out. Also, again, check me out on TikTok at the Howdy Beans podcast. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to follow and review the podcast on Spotify. And yeah, I think that should be everything. So thank you very much for joining me for George in the Jungle. Next week, it is February. So it'll be Valentine's Day soon. So I've got some topics in the works, some fun ones. And I can't wait for you all to join me. So until then, I'll see you all very soon. And I wish you all a very happy day.